Thank you. First of all, I'd like to begin by thanking the Shi'a Research Institute for putting this very important, wonderful conference together. I was talking to Dr. Kithir a few weeks ago about the fact that I had dreamt up the idea of a Shi'a Research Institute as a graduate student. I'm so glad that he has brought it into real fruition here in Canada and not in the United States. It's good to be in Canada here where nicer people can be found in my own homeland. I hope that there's no recorded lines here. I'm an American and very proud to be an American.
Americans right here.
Come on. Scholarship in the West has tended to focus on the influence that Sheikh al-Akbar Muhyiddin had on Shi'ism. However, there has been virtually no studies done on the influence that Shiite philosophers, mystics, and scholars have on the Great Master. One can suppose that the reason for this might be because he was a staunch Sunni, as has been said, who wrote a long polemical paragraph against the Shiites, describing them in the following manner. I quote, "This is how the people of bid'ah and passions, ahwa, arose. The devils cast into them a correct principle, aslan sahihan, about which could they entertain no doubts, then insinuated to them misperceptions based on misunderstandings until they went astray. Thus, these things are connected to the shaitan, to the devil, by virtue of the correct principle. If only they knew that shaitan was involved in these matters and is a student of them, learning from them. There is nowhere where this has appeared more than among the Shia, especially the Imamiyya among them. The devils from the jinn got involved with them from the beginning through the love of the Ahl Bayt and devoting their love completely to them. They saw that this was the highest means of drawing near to God. And it is. If only they had stopped there and not added to it. Yet they transgressed, going from the love of the Ahl Bayt over to two forms of wrong. Some crossed the bounds over to hating the companions and cursing them because the companions did not advance the Ahl Bayt for leadership. This group supposed that the Ahl Bayt had more right to these worldly offices, and we know well what has come from them. Another group went even further than cursing the companions to even attacking the messenger of God and Gabriel and God for their failing to explicitly make clear to the people the rank and position of the Ahl Bayt, and for failing to explicitly state their right to the office of caliph. Some of these latter would famously sing this line, "There was no one trustworthy in the messenger of the trustworthy." This was all the result of a correct principle, namely the love of the Ahl Bayt, which in their vision of things was corrupted, causing them to go astray and lead others astray. Look then at what extremism in religion can do. It took them outside the limit, causing their affair to be reversed towards opposite. God exalted says in his book, "O people of the book, do not go to excesses in your religion, going beyond the truth, and do not follow the passions of a people who went astray before. They misled many and lost away." End quote. So here we have a direct quotation where Ibn Arabi explicitly attacks not just the Shiites, but explicitly the Imamiyya. What were they at the point? Another reason may be because scholars have assumed that he had not read their works. This would be nothing less than naive. Ample scholarship has proved and described that the fact that the Sheikh had a massive library and read from various sources. Furthermore, if he did not read Shiite sources, he would not have been able to produce such intricate critiques of the school he regarded as a transgression. Ibn Arabi in this regard could or would have been an implicit follower of the famous dictum of Ali, which is found in the Ghurur al-Hikam. It is not what is said, it is not who said it, but what is said. It's not man qala that's important, but ma qala. This presentation proposes that Ibn Arabi's approach to three topics was ultimately influenced by Shiite scholars. These topics are his ontology, his approach to esotericism, and his aspects of his applications to theurgy. Ibn Arabi's approach to ontology is both similar and dissimilar to his philosophical predecessors. I argue that he approaches ontology in an esoteric manner, which is very similar to the Shiite Brethren of Purity, Ikhwan as-Safa, who existed in Basra between 870 and 950. the Brethren of Purity subscribe to a Platinian ontological cartography where God as the one emanates or creates the universal intellect, al-aql al-fa'al, which then emanates the universal soul, which then emanates matter and the rest of the universe. Ibn Arabi approaches ontology in the same exact manner, he described, and both the Ikhwan al-Safa and Ibn Arabi use Quranic language to describe these principles. For example, the Brethren describe the universal intellect and the universal soul in the following manner. I quote, "Things are different forms that the Creator generated in the first original being, that is the universal intellect, that the law calls a tablet, the Sharia calls a tablet. And the first being that appeared and was generated as a simple spiritual substance is called by the wise men the universal soul, and which the law calls the pen. Then after it another substance appeared called by the wise men prime matter, and by the law called the writing. Then after it another substance appeared that had 3 dimensions, length, breadth, and depth, called by the law the written, and by the wise men the first body. Then after this, the first body, the upper bodies, the 4 elements, and the 3 generated beings were created." In the citation above, the Brethren state that there are 6 principal levels of reality. The first is the reality of God. The second is the universal intellect, which is called the tablet, an image, a motif taken from the Quran. The third is a simple spiritual substance called the universal soul, which they call the pen, another motif taken from the Quran. Following upon this, they argue, is the realm of prime matter, which they call the writing, and then the written. Similarly, Ibn Arabi describes the same principles in the following manner. I quote, "The first intellect, also called the highest pen, the innovator. The first intellect was created directly by God without any intermediary. Hence it is the only created thing that is innovated in the strict sense of the term, since everything else is created through one of the more intermediaries. The universal soul, the preserved tablet, the upraiser. The name upraiser lifts up something that is already there, and hence it is associated with those human individuals who are raised up to be prophets, and with all human beings at the resurrection, which is called the uprising. In this case, the universal soul is the first existing thing to be raised up from another existing thing, that is, the first intellect. On the intellectual or spiritual level, intellect and soul, or pen and tablet, are the prototypes of all cosmic activities and receptivity." Also, he brings in the gender differences of masculine and feminine here. "The soul reflects this cosmic polarity internally in its 2 basic faculties, knowledge, where it receives from the intellect, and practice, whereby it displays its own traces in everything below itself. The dust substance, the last, known in philosophical terms as prime matter, and first highly, the dust substance, like nature, remains unknown except through its traces. It fills the void and is the underlying matter of everything in the universe except for the intellect and soul. Its connection with the name last has to do with the fact that the last is the principle of the next world, which more properly should be translated as the last world. In the same way, all things arise from the dust substance and return to it." Like the Brethren of Purity, end quote, Ibn Arabi equates both of the principles, meaning the universal intellect and the universal soul, with the pen and the tablet, although they switch which principle belongs to which Quranic motif. They're not one-to-one here, but they're using different principles for different purposes. Ibn Arabi and the Brethren subscribe to a 4-fold paradigm where the world is created through the intermediary of prime matter, the world soul, and the universal intellect. What is significant about this connection is the fact that other Sunni peripatetic philosophers, such as Avicenna and Farabi, did not equate these principles with Quranic motifs. The reason why is because these philosophers did not utilize the Quran for philosophical exegesis, whereas Shiite philosophers, such as the Brethren of Purity, did. It is for this reason that I argue that Ibn Arabi either read the treatises directly or borrowed it through an intermediary. So I'm not arguing that Ibn Arabi might have read it directly, but it could have come through generations of influences. We're talking about 2-3 centuries here. Ibn Arabi's approach to esotericism is also very similar to the Brethren in several ways. For example, the Brethren argue that every letter of the Arabic alphabet has a correspondence with both a number and an ontological reality. In their first treatise, the Brethren write the following, I quote, "Know, O brother, may God aid you and us with a spirit from him." Now this is a line that I could have sworn I've seen in some of Ibn Arabi's writings. I know Mullah Sadr uses it left and right. I've seen that in his letters. I thought I saw it somewhere in Ibn Arabi, but I just couldn't find a citation. Perhaps Dr. Lawson or someone else may know. Anyway, "Know, O brother, may God aid you and us with a spirit from him, that the relation of the Creator, exalted be his praise, to all existent beings, mawjudat, is like the relationship of the unit 1 to other numbers, and the relationship of the universal intellect to existence is like the relation of the number 2 to other numbers, and the universal soul to existence is like 3, and the relationship of prime matter is like the number 4." End quote. The Brethren also equate each of the principles to the letters of the Arabic alphabet A, B, T, and TH, Alif, Ba, Ta, and Tha, in their summaries. They then state that the letters are produced from the previous letter, just as 4 is produced from 3, 3 is produced from 2, 2 is produced from 1, which is God. Ibn Arabi approaches these ontological realities from the perspective of numbers in a very similar manner. On this, Ibn Arabi equates the number 1 with God, the number 2 with universal intellect, the universal soul with 3, and so on and so forth. This again was, in my opinion, taken ultimately from the Brethren's Neo-Pythagorean ontology. It is important to note that the Brethren could have borrowed these ideas from 2 other sources. The first source could have been Jabir ibn Hayyan, who they do cite in the Rasail, who was a purported student of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq. Jabir ibn Hayyan was one of the earliest scholars who argued that each of the Arabic letters have a numerological and elemental equivalent. That is, for example, 1 is equal to Aleph, which could be equal to, hypothetically, mercury or iron or something like that. The second source could have also been the mother of the book, al-Kitab, which goes as far as equating the Arabic letters with numbers, elements, stars, and human body parts. In his works, Ibn Arabi makes the same exact equivalence. For example, he says that the letter Hamza is equal to the divine name That, the divine essence, and he equates that with one of the houses in the stars, the Sharatain, the 2 signs. He says that Ha is equivalent to the divine name Al-Badi, and he says that's equivalent to the belly of Aries, etc., etc. Although it is not possible to empirically prove whether Ibn Arabi read these sources, it is possible to postulate that these sources influence authors Ibn Arabi did read. We know that several Sufis and other philosophers, such as the Brethren in Purity, did subscribe to this worldview. The last topic that this paper addresses is how Ibn Arabi puts all these theoretical sciences into practice. I argue that Ibn Arabi advocated for the practice of Theurgy, which literally through means such as magic squares. Before addressing how Ibn Arabi advocated for Theurgy, it is important to clarify what Theurgy actually means. The word Theurgy means divine work. That's what it means, divine work. It's a Greek word. And I follow Brian P. Copenhaver's definition of Theurgy as having a higher and lower form. I quote, "Higher Theurgy includes ritual elements. Its final stage is the disembodied intellection that produces union. The Theurgist reaches these heights, however, after also completing lower rites of initiation that depend on material objects and involve the body. The preliminary rites have their own efficacy, but since their powers come from cosmic sympathy, their effects are confined to the world of nature and lower spirits. Unless the rites lead up to the immaterial noetic stages of higher Theurgy, whose autonomous powers transcend the cosmos, this descent into the body and matter to exploit them magically will be worse than incomplete. It will be a defilement, both physically and spiritually." End quote. As is well established, Ibn Arabi argues for the potential of the perfect human being, al-insan al-kamil, who can invoke the divine in a real manner. If he did not, he would not have seen the human being as ultimately being a microcosm, a small version of the universe that is a reflection of the macrocosm, a large version of the universe. This was a belief that was again advocated by the al-Kitab and Jabir ibn Hayyan and the Brethren of Purity. In his writings, Ibn Arabi bring up a magic square that adds up to number 15 in every direction. I'm sure many of you have seen this magic square. I'm sorry to make a presentation. Ghazali cites it. It's all over the place. This was a magic square that was originally taken from the Chinese, and the Brethren advocated in their second treatise on geometry. At least that's what Anne-Marie Schimmel says. I'm not really sure if she's correct on that, but she writes that in her book on This magic square was cited by various Sunni scholars such as Ghazali, and was a source of great problems for those who were against the science of theurgy. However, in the case of Ibn Arabi, this magic square could be seen as a reflection of his subscription to theurgy in the same way as the Brethren. For both the Brethren and Ibn Arabi, each of these numbers had alphabetical and planetary equivalents. The corners of the magic squares have numbers that equate to Arabic letters that make the name Buduh, who was seen as a spirit of protection. The numbers that are in the squares also reflects how planets play different roles in the life of the human being. In other words, the magic square can be seen as a reflection of the cosmogonic activity that astrology, alchemy, arithmetic, geometry play in our lives and can be used as change in the physical world. Ibn Arabi and the Brethren's use of this talismanic magic square reflects their theurgical belief in squares and symbols, and shows how symbols can be used for the invocations of spirits, spiritual transformation, transmutations, and protection. Side note, during the corona pandemic, when I ended up getting that virus, I ended up trying to test this thing out. I drew the square out and kept it in my pocket while I was listening to Jay-Z's It's a Hard Knocks Life. So I'm not really sure which one saved me, but either the magic square or Jay-Z, I came through it. Ibn Arabi and the Brethren are fundamentally validating numerology also as a legitimate science. They both demonstrate how numbers, letters, and geometric shapes can be symbolically combined to invoke spiritual beings. Ibn Arabi and the Brethren of Purity are not exoteric thinkers. Instead, they are esoteric philosophers who recognize the exterior or outer and interior or inner utility of every object in science they study. This paper argues that Ibn Arabi did not simply create the esoteric doctrines that so many scholars in the modern world claims that he did. His knowledge was not built in a vacuum. Instead, Ibn Arabi could have been seen as a synthesizer of knowledge which he acquired from various sources. Throughout the centuries, scholarship has not addressed the Shiite sources, which may have influenced how Ibn Arabi thought. Furthermore, scholars have not recognized that Shiite scholars and thinkers were developing their own school of philosophy influenced by the school of Hermeticism and Pythagoreanism, which were inherently congruent with their own beliefs. This paper seeks to advocate for the belief that Ibn Arabi was influenced by Shiite Hermeticism and Neo-Pythagoreanism that was present in al-Kitab, the works of Jabir ibn Hayyan, and the treatises of the Brethren of Purity. And I believe this is evident in all of their approaches to ontology, esoteric numerology, and finally, theurgy. Thank you very much.
Can you stay at the podium just because it might be easier for Q&A? I've been told it's being recorded. So. We'll start with Muhammad and then.
Thank you, Dr. Zaidi. I just had one. It's really just a question to get your opinion on something, which is that Michael Epstein, I believe that's his name. He wrote a book, I don't know, maybe about a decade ago or something like that, trying to show something similar to what you showed here today or explained. To what extent do you find his arguments convincing? Because he locates a lot of the influence into Ibn Arabi through the Ikhwan al-Safa, but also through his Ismaili writings. So, it's gotten various reviews. I myself was reviewing it at one point, and I couldn't publish the review. I just sent it to him. I was like, I don't want to, I just disagree with a lot of what he said. But there is a backstory, especially with the Ikhwan al-Safa. So it's not like wrong what he was saying, but it's just difficult to demonstrate a lot of that textually. To what extent does his argument inform yours, and to what extent is his argument even convincing to begin with?
I'm overall sympathetic to his argument. And I realize that this paper opens up, reopens up that Pandora's box. The question of influence, the question of where do these things come from. I'm very sympathetic to what he says. One of Ibn Arabi's very famous contemporaries, Ibn Sab'in, was, I believe it is Ibn Khaldun who says that Ibn Arabi and Ibn Sab'in share the same doctrines, except Ibn Arabi hides it better. And if that is true, I mean, I don't like to agree with Ibn Khaldun a lot of things, but this is one of those things where I wonder if he's actually right. Ibn Sab'in was very explicitly influenced by the Ikhwan al-Safa, by Jabir ibn Hayyan. We see it in his writings, we see it in his Bud al-Arif and other things. If these people are reading from the same sources and Ibn Arabi just decided not to cite from them, then I think he does have an argument there. But, I mean, my argument is very simple. Nothing is built in a vacuum here. And I think that Ibn Arabi, as we all know, does cite from other important Sunni sources and addresses the fact of who he's read in the Sunni world. But with this initial citation that I wrote, where he does takfir on the Imam, on the Shiite Muslims, one can definitely say that he did not want to explicitly make those connections because of his own Shari beliefs. Whether I'm right or wrong about that, I think there still needs to be empirical evidence found about that. And I think it's going to be it's altogether difficult to prove. But Epstein was right about the Ismaili influence, in the sense that al-Kitab is seen as more of an Ismaili work than it is a 12-er book. But again, who really knows? I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much for a really fascinating presentation. I very much liked your use of the term theurgy. I introduced the term Quranic theurgy back in 2012. I presented again at AUB, but the emerging would-be gatekeepers of the field of the study of the occult sciences in Islam, namely Matthew Melvin Kushki,
yes, Noah
Gardner, and Leon Saif don't like that, so they didn't use it. But I'm glad that you're talking about Quranic theurgy. Regarding that magic square, the corners are 2, 4, 6, 8, Badal, Waw, and Ha. Buduh is not for protection, it is for joining people together, it's for love. That's why it's even numbers, even is 2, you join with the odd numbers, you break people up.
Right.
So Buduh, if you rearrange the letters, you get wood and you get hub.
Yep.
Now, about the cosmology that you talked about and the connection, I would just like to bring to your attention again, Al-Buni, and it's been established that they had a common teacher, Abdulaziz al-Mahdawi. There's a paper on it by Gerald Elmore, and to be fair, Kushki talks about it in his dissertation. And I think that's quite interesting.
Yes.
So that was in Tunis, so maybe he had some connection, I don't know, with Al-Andalus, who could have gotten ideas from that side, or maybe he read, who knows. So that's possible, and there's one other thing I was going to say, but I think it escapes me at the moment now. But yeah, so I just wanted to point that out. I remember now. So also, there's something which you might find interesting in the Shams al-Ma'arif. Now let's put aside the different recensions and so on. I've looked at many manuscripts. But Al-Buni quotes things from Imam Ali, which don't really exist in Shia sources. I've asked many Shia scholars, including the great Muhakkik, my teacher Syed Jalali, rahimahullah, and he had never heard of these poems. So there's a poem called the Jaljalutiyya, which has a lot of very peculiar things in it, and there's another text which is typically called the Birhatiyya or the Barhatiyya. If you're not familiar, you should look at those. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, this is very briefly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want to respond before?
I think I'm all right, but yeah, thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
talk later.
Wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And I just would like to make a plea that we somehow or another burn out of our work and our ideas and our souls this anxiety about influence. Ibn Arabi was influenced by everything.
Yeah.
We are all influenced by everything.
Yeah.
if someone put a sign up on the wall that said, "No reading," the first thing you would do would be to read it. Right? You know? So I think that we really need to move beyond that. You know, in the case of the history of English literature, Harold Bloom has the book on this. And it might be useful for us to read such things. That is to say that every poem that is written, in fact, restates, addresses, argues with, imitates, and departs from all previous poetry. One of the great gifts that the Islamic world has given to us is an example of this massive conversation that's gone on throughout the Dar al-Islam from the very beginning. Even if we, with our squeamishness, don't like to put two people in the same room, they didn't have the same problem.
No.
At all.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So, thank
No.
you.
I was going to just say that my citation for the use of the word protection was taken directly from the Ikhwan al-Safa. As you know, in their second treatise, they say this is supposed to be used for women who are in a state of pregnancy, you know, to
But
protect.
that's the whole square, not Wuduh by itself.
No, that's the whole square, but yeah, yep, exactly. Correct.
Other questions, comments, objections? Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.